This is the Weather Lounge here at WeatherWorks.
Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to the Weather Lounge. I'm your host, meteorologist Brad Miller, and our podcast, as always, comes to you from our WeatherWorks headquarters here in Hackettstown, New Jersey. And joining me for this week's episode is my fellow weather prophet and meteorologist, Mike Mahalik. Hey there, Mike.
Hey, Brad, how's it going? Kind of biblical on that, don't you think? I don't know if I consider myself a biblical type figure.
Yeah, but you're still a weather prophet.
I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah. So what do we got going on this episode, Brad? Because we're starting off on a good foot.
Yeah, I know, but you know what? Thoughts of winter continue as we head deeper into fall, and we're getting ready for the holidays now, and Christmas isn't that far away, and before you know it, Mike, people will be asking, what's the chance of a white Christmas and things like that.
Yeah, this is true. Actually, having my coffee here this morning, and I have a candy cane next to it. So you're talking about Christmas. I already got some candy canes going, and it's quite a good flavor if you have a candy cane and coffee. So you get like the peppermint mocha kind of thing going on.
And you know what? And I know it's getting towards the holiday season because Chris Castellano, our Midwest forecaster and meteorologist here at WeatherWorks, he already sent me a Mariah Carey
oh no,
all I Want for Christmas video. So
oh no.
Yeah, it's a long, you've heard of that. It's an inside joke.
I know. Well, I'll tell you, there's not much you can do about it because I was listening to, this isn't a shameless plug or anything, but Sirius XM I was listening to, and I think the channel that was programmed on my truck was the Billy Joel channel.
Yes, I did. No, I did the same thing. I've been listening to Billy Joel, and now they've switched it over.
Right, and now they switched it over to Holly.
Yep.
So
it's the Holly channel. Yep.
Here we are. So anyway, we're getting a little sidetracked there, but this is probably a good podcast since we're talking about winter, talking about the holiday season, to dedicate to some winter weather jargon you're going to hear over the next probably 4 months or so here of the winter season.
Yeah, winter weather jargon kind of tossed around the title a few times, but I think
I think that was one of your adamant statements that you needed to say jargon in this title. But hey, what are we going to do about it?
I know. I just was thinking it would be a good way to grab the audience, jargon. I just like the word, but you're right. But anyway, to join us in today's podcast, we're going to invite our occasional host and, of course, our producer that we can never do this podcast without, Mike Priante. Hey there, Mike.
Hey, guys. I was looking up some synonyms for jargon in case you're not looking to keep that word, but we got balderdash, slang, vernacular.
Balderdash.
Balderdash.
Isn't that like a game from the 90s?
Sounds
like
it
is.
The lingo, the weather lingo.
Lingo, I like that one. That was another. That was a game show.
Lingo
or
true.
Like that.
I think so. That's a playoff of bingo, I think.
Yeah.
The what was it called? That network, the Game Show Network, right?
Yeah,
right.
They always play those all the reruns from all the old game shows. Like they still show reruns of like when Bob Barker was still on The Price is
gosh,
Right.
Yeah. My favorite used to be Press Your Luck. That was always fun with the
funny no whammy, no whammy.
Whammies.
It's still on.
It's still on. Yeah, the new one's still on. Yeah, they still have the new episodes, but yeah, no, I mean, man, good times. And of course, I was listening to your conversation about some potential Christmas-esque things as we get into November. And hey, you know what? I know you guys are probably full into Christmas by now, but I'm looking at the calendar, and it is it's not December yet. So let's hold off on that Christmas cheer.
Yeah,
guys.
well, you know what? The television commercials and everything on social media.
Well,
they started with the Christmas
commercials
stuff.
start coming on when it's like.
As soon as we turned the calendar to November, it was off.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh well.
So, but no, I'm excited to talk a little bit of winter, though. I know it is still November, but do have wintry threats. I mean, we had wintry threats across the country already from the beginning of October.
And our CST map continues to fill up.
Oh yeah, our certified snowfall totals, shameless plug, have been pretty much full speed ahead here as we go into the later part of the fall. But of course, going into actual winter, we have a couple of things we want to talk about. So I'm excited to dive into some of these weather jargon, lingo, balderdash. I'm gonna say balderdash. I like that better. But before we go into all of that, guys, let's just take a quick break and we'll be right back after this short message. So don't go away. Hey everyone, it's Mike Prianti from the Weather Lounge here, and let me tell you, dehydration is no joke. I went through it myself once, and it's not fun. You get headaches, muscle spasms, cramps, the whole 9 yards. But proper functional hydration is essential for just about everyone. Sometimes, though, water may not be enough, and that's where Liquid IV comes in. They're the #1 powdered hydration brand in America, and their hydration multiplier is something you're most likely missing in your daily routine. You don't even have to be a sports professional to enjoy it either. With just one stick, you can hydrate twice as fast than using water alone. It has 3 times the amount of electrolytes than leading sports drinks, it's made from non-GMO ingredients, and it's chock full of essential vitamins. I personally enjoy the passion fruit flavor, but there are other great refreshing flavors you can choose from as well. So whether you're out landscaping, plowing a parking lot in a snowstorm, heading out for that afternoon jog, or even just feeling run down, Liquid IV is your go-to source for all hydration and wellness. Get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use code WeatherLounge, capital W, capital L, at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code WeatherLounge at liquidiv.com.
Yeah, welcome back, everyone. And while we've covered most of these topics in some previous podcasts about winter weather terms, jargon, balderdash, whatever you want to call it, if you listen to the intro, I did look up balderdash. It was a game developed in the 80s, though. So I was a little, I said 90s. I was a little bit earlier than that. Something about definitions of words and choosing the right one from your teammates to earn points. So anyway, that's neither here or there. But so anyway, let's get into some of these winter weather terms or lingo or whatever you'd like to call it here for the season. And yeah,
can I go first, Mike?
Well, if you're going to interrupt, go ahead.
Yeah, I have some great winter weather jargon I'd like to start with. And the first one's going to be bombogenesis.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, just dive right into the deep end.
Yeah,
there's a few others though that could really take the cake here, but I think this is the best one to start with at least. But you know what? Before I get to bombogenesis, I got to cover something else first. Actually, I'll cover 2 winter weather jargons in one here, because you can't talk about bombogenesis without talking about a nor'easter. And of course, I think that's the most common term you'll hear, especially if you live in the Northeast on the East Coast. Midwest, not so much, but you hear about nor'easters basically as early as October. Doesn't always have to be snow, but your typical nor'easter, it's a storm that develops somewhere along the East Coast usually, and then it rides northeast or northeast up the coast, usually impacts the mid-Atlantic, most of the Northeast, and of course New England. We use what we call the 40-70 benchmark as a spot that you want to have the center of the storm at. And what that means is, you want the center of the storm somewhere near like 40 north latitude and 70 west longitude, because that gets you the best, I guess, proximity to the storm, where the I-95 corridor will at least see a good, a good healthy snowfall out of it, if it is cold enough, obviously. But usually that's what we use, the old 40-70 benchmark. And you hear that kind of tossed around sometimes even during the winter. But yeah, nor'easter, you can't go wrong with using that as one of your first winter weather jargons. Now, bombogenesis.
Wait, before you get on to bombo, because I know you want to talk about that.
Yeah,
but,
I know.
The 40-70 benchmark, I thought that was something more for like New England folks to hit the 40-70, and then that's when they get the heavy snow running through
New England
the major
does.
cities,
Boston stuff.
I've
So the 40 Yeah, sorry, Mike, but I was gonna say the 40/70 benchmark. Yeah, that's gonna be your criteria for good snow, up and down the 95 stretch. So obviously, a nor'easter, doesn't have to go through the 40/70. So it's not a nor'easter if it doesn't get to the 40/70. But like Brad said, the 40/70 is kind of our like the sweet spot for places like Boston, New York, even Philadelphia to an extent. But I think the farther west you go, you start to not so much, oh, you're not going to get, like any snow at all, but it just starts to kind of trail back. But, we have the 40/70 benchmark. We have the coastal huggers, as we've heard before. Those are where it's inside the benchmark. And what happens there is the warmer air from the system, drags more ocean air. Exactly. So you have more mixing, potential for more rain toward the shores. But on the upside, places like Scranton, and maybe parts in farther inland to Philadelphia could get some decent snow out of it, while Boston probably rains.
You know what? Maybe that's what I was thinking about because I'm northwest of I-95 in
Well, there
eastern
you go.
Pennsylvania. So I don't, in my backyard, as people like to say, I am not. I want it inside the 40/70.
Yeah, that's true for you. Yeah.
For me personally, but I guess for the 95, yeah, that works out well.
Of
And
course, there's subtleties too. I mean, you got to take into effect the strength of the system. Is it strengthening? Is it weakening?
yeah,
What time of the year it is, obviously,
sure.
also. But again,
But yeah, I think the nor'easter pretty much got its name from the northeasterly strong winds that
oh yeah,
accompany
well,
these
that's
storms.
yeah.
From the old, probably colonial days of when they started naming these type systems. So, um,
Yeah, that's true. I have to look that up. The historic how a nor'easter
when
became a
the
nor'easter.
Come on,
naming
Brad. You didn't
invention.
look this up before we did
I
this
didn't look up that
podcast? Come
far.
on. You didn't do your
I
research?
That's
didn't really.
because he was so pumped to talk about
Okay,
bombogenesis
let's get to
that he
bombogenesis.
that he over gave an oversight to nor'easter because he was like, yeah, nor'easter, but I want to talk about bombogenesis.
I just love terminology. That's just me. I like finding what
Well, they're the buzzwords that you like to see, people like to use on TV and social media. Bombogenesis.
All right, well, let's go, Brad. Bombogenesis.
It's basically just a rapid intensifying nor'easter. Over a 24-hour period, it's classified as bombogenesis. It's a drop of at least 24 millibars. So like maybe a nor'easter that's going from 990 millibars all the way down to 966 within 24 hours. That's bombogenesis. So of course it can go faster than that, and it can deepen even further, and get stronger. But that's kind of the idea, though. 24 millibars in 24 hours. So you start to see things like that. It's a pretty serious system. So that's
yeah. And I also heard, and I don't know if this is because someone said it and all of a sudden now it's catching on, or if this is also a thing that people call these storms. But when you go through bombogenesis, I've heard the term bomb cyclone, and
Mm,
that's become a very big buzzword. Like, we're getting a bomb
yeah.
cyclone, we're getting a nor'easter, we're getting a
yeah.
bomb cyclone. Like, what is that? And I mean, I think what that sounds like to me is that it's just, well, obviously cyclonic, that we know what that is, but it's just taking the word bombogenesis, the process of storms rapidly deepening, and just adding it to a cyclonic system. So bomb cyclone, even though it's not a tropical system, so to speak.
Yeah, it's just a riff on bombogenesis, basically.
Yeah.
They're trying to make it, sound a little more intimidating, I would
More
say.
clickbaity.
It
But
does sound very clickbaity, yeah.
it would make me click.
There you go.
But normally when I click on stuff like that, I was like, okay, what's this all about? Because we know how things get blown out of proportion sometimes, and we want to make sure we reel that in for our clients who get our storm alert forecasts and things like that. Because if it's in the media like that, we're certainly going to be hearing about it in questions and consultation, and we want to make sure that we provide the proper information.
By the way, I did do some research. You're welcome,
Okay, there
Oh,
Brad.
we
there you
go.
go.
About nor'easter, and so it actually, yeah, it was a term that was originated by the British, pretty much British English, as early as the late 16th
Wow.
century. By John Davis in 1594, who mentions the word
I was going to say that must be 1500.
Yeah, the 1500s. But northeast by north raiseth a degree in saying 24 leagues, whatever that means. But pretty much this was written in in one of the dictionaries and in one of his books. The Seaman's Secrets is what it's called. So it was basically, as you kind of thought, it's a direction, northeast. And so a nor'easter is, well, kind of figure that out. Storms that have winds blowing out of the northeast. So yeah, it's a really old term, but I just wanted to add that little tidbit before we jump into the next jargon.
So I think it might be a good time to jump into polar vortex.
The polar vortex. Okay.
Yes, I mean that's been a buzzword for the last several years. I don't know when they really caught on to that in the media. But
I think I do. You know what? I don't want to interrupt you, Mike. I'm gonna go get something real quick.
Okay,
but you continue your conversation. I'm gonna get something. I'll be right back.
Perfect. I'll give some background to that. So, yeah, I mean, it caught on recently in the media, but this is actually something that's been basically discovered since the 1950s. So it's been studied, and it's basically a large area of upper level low pressure that surrounds the North Pole and also the South Pole, honestly. But basically, it locks in the coldest air around the North Pole. So when does it affect us here in the Northeast and Midwest, and even through the entire continuous United States? Is when we have that polar vortex, get disrupted, and then you have pieces of it starting to break off and funneling its way down into parts of the United States. So that brings in really cold air, and that usually doesn't affect the area without it. So it's not something that, I just want people to understand that it's not something that
like when the polar vortex is going to hit my backyard.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like the polar vortex is going to arrive and you are going to, be inundated by snow and stuff like that. I mean, sure, a storm can accompany it as it dives in, but basically we're just talking about cold air that is coming straight from the pole down into the area, and creating those record temperatures.
And to build on that, Mike, and if you really like snow, you actually kind of want a weak polar vortex, because that's when it gets wobbly. A strong polar vortex keeps all the Arctic air kind of locked in up around the North Pole, but you want that kind of wobbliness and kind of a weaker one where it kind of spreads the cold air southward in latitude, and it kind of impacts then Europe and parts of North America, including the East Coast then and the Midwest. So if you hear of a strong polar vortex, it usually means it's not all that cold out.
Yeah, so strong polar vortex will keep everything locked up in the poles. Like Brad said, the weaker polar vortex allows it to break into lobes and to break into our backyard. So how does that happen? How does it break up? Well, there's some things that cause it to do that. One could be a sudden stratospheric warming. That's way up in the upper atmosphere. That can help weaken that polar vortex. And you can even have strong high pressure ridging and blocking that tends to break it up. And even intense typhoons can kind of get wrapped up into the northern stream, into the polar jet, and kind of disrupt the area. So there's several ways that vortex can get disrupted and send some cold air our way. But it looks like Mike is just itching to talk about what he was trying to find when he first heard about the polar vortex in the media. I think it was.
Well, first I was in college, so I have a shirt that actually from Penn State. We made these shirts because it was one of the apparently based on the shirt. We set a first record low in State College since 2002. The low was -9 degrees, January 7th. That was my first time ever experiencing below zero temperatures, Fahrenheit. But yeah, it was the winter of 2014.
You could see it. Yeah, that's cool.
Well, people that are listening won't be able to see this, but we're
right.
Yeah, so that was when really the media took off. 2013, 2014 was that really big outbreak.
so this is really nice because Mike's like, I was in college at Penn State
Oh, I knew he
in
was going to bring this
2013,
up. I
14.
knew he was going to bring this up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was like, oh, geez, I started at WeatherWorks in 2008. I mean, what? Anyway.
Well, Mike, you and I, we had that morning below zero at the office, and we did our
Ooh, yeah, the water experiment.
the boiling water experiment. Yeah, it's on a video somewhere on our YouTube channel.
It is, yeah.
Absolutely.
That was a cool video. I saw that.
I've never done that before up until that day. That was cool.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I remember that year because I mean, the cold air, it was so cold. I don't remember how cold, but I do know that the vortex piece of it broke off and it dove right into like the southeastern parts of the United States. I mean, it was really cold. Like Tennessee got into the teens. Places down there, they don't typically see that much cold air. So, I wonder how cold it's going to be for this winter, though. I wonder who could tell us, Mike.
Me?
Yeah, Mike. Didn't you do an episode maybe a while back talking about the winter season? Again, I'm all about the shameless plugs here.
Of course, yeah. We did have the episode talking about the long range forecast and what we expect for the winter, and just recapping that whole thing, we did expect the coldest air of the season to arrive in late January into February. That looks like the months that we'll be experiencing most of our wintry weather, or I should say the most significant wintry weather would be during that time. And not that it's not going to be something mixy and things like that
Well,
beforehand.
we've already had a couple of events, especially in New England.
Yeah, absolutely. I know all about it. I was forecasting it.
Do you, Mike?
Yeah.
Mike's our one of our New England forecasters.
Yeah. A couple of overrunning events. Little moisture getting in there, a little pretty good lift, and yeah, got a little bit of snow to start the early season. Mostly over the interior, though. Didn't get into places like Boston and all that. They might have had a few flakes, but that's about it. But yeah. So great, Mike, that we now know like how old I am and how old Brad is. That's good. Thank you, as always.
No problem.
But
Mike can say we are Penn State, and we can say we are old.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt when I went to a Penn State game for like the first time in 10 years earlier this year, and the stadium chants are different, and I was just I don't know what's going on, man. But anyway, Mike, you didn't go yet, so what do you got for lingo?
I was going to say, let me try to steer the direction of this podcast before I get thrown out. So let's dive into something that New England gets a lot, and those are clipper systems. Mike, I'm sure you're very familiar with clipper systems. In the Northeast.
Yeah, absolutely. Moisture starved, good times trying to figure out how much snow falls, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And
and Mike, you can actually do a 2-for-1 here, just like I did.
I can.
If you look ahead, yeah.
Let me take a look here and see.
With our next term,
you're gonna have to refresh my memory here, Brad.
All right.
What do you think I should pair this up with?
It's possible that it looks like snow squalls are on the list. That may follow the clipper.
You know what?
If it's a stretch.
You know what? Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, guys, I'm going to start with clipper, and we're gonna make our way to snow squall and see how that works.
Perfect.
There you
so
go.
Anyway, so clipper is what I was about to say is usually, well, not usually, but sometimes they're associated with the word Alberta, because a lot of the times these systems develop around Alberta, Canada. Alberta clippers, they're known as Canadian clippers sometimes because the track of these storms pretty much take it right across the northern border of the US and Canada, across North Dakota, Minnesota. They usually, graze the Great Lakes. And then, of course, they make their way into, the Northeast. And as Mike said, they are moisture starved. There's, we're not getting a lot of that moisture coming out of the Gulf like you would with a nor'easter. You're not going to get these bombing out. There's no bombogenesis to speak of really with clipper systems, at least when they're over land, as they're coming in. They're not really strong systems, but what they do have is that cold air, that Arctic air coming in from Canada. And what that usually does is, it helps the snow consistency. because when you have a lot of moisture with the system, we call these snow ratios. I don't know if you ever heard of 10 to 1, 15 to 1. These are snow ratios. For every inch of liquid, you'll get 10 inches of snow. These storms could be as high as 20 to 25 per one, which means that, what you would typically get out of a regular storm, consistent, 10, 11 to 1 inches or 10, 11 inches to 1, you would get 25 inches. So that means that this snow is very fluffy. It's very light. It's the kind of snow where it almost looks like powder, where you could just take a leaf blower and blow it around. But that also means that you probably get more snow out of these systems. Not the kind of good snow for making snowmen, unfortunately, or snowballs. So if you have any kids, they'll be out there, they'll be having fun, but making snowmen probably not the best kind of snow for that. But a lot of snow nonetheless out of these systems. They're kind of sneaky.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of snow in reference to the amount of liquid that gets produced. So if you only have 0.1 of liquid that falls, you might get 2.5 inches of snow, possibly even 3 inches of snow out of it. But again, like Mike said, very fluffy stuff.
Exactly. Now, something that Brad did not mention is with the terminology, because I love terminology here. Of course, Alberta Clippers take their name from, well, obviously, Alberta, Canada. And clippers. Does anybody know what a clipper is?
It's a ship.
It's a ship, yeah.
Yes, it's a ship from the 19th century.
I'm very well versed.
Okay. Mike is apparently a shipologist. Is that a thing?
No, not in ships. Ship with a P.
Well, no, that's what I said. A
I thought you said
shipologist,
chips,
right?
like potato chips.
Chips? Oh, a
Chips.
chipologist, like
That's not what I was thinking.
Ruffles
but anyway.
or Lay's or something like that. No.
Um,
No, but no, I mean, yeah, Clipper systems kind of take their name really from the ships and of course Alberta, but the term wasn't coined until the late 1960s by a NWS meteorologist. His name is Reinhard Harms. Yes. He noted, now again, Clipper ships are pretty fast. Actually, they were the fastest ships in the 19th century. He noted how fast these systems are. And if you notice, Alberta Clippers, they're pretty fast. Like, they don't last very long. They're in and out, they're out. They're not like going to stay over a day or two. They're probably in and out in like a couple hours, like 4 to 5 hours. They're done. So he noted that. He saw how fast they're moving through, and so he kind of was like, you know what? They're almost like clippers, like ships that would go really fast. And so, he put 2 and 2 together when where they came from, and all of a sudden you have Alberta Clippers. So you can thank Reinhardt for giving us this term. So,
yeah, perfect.
Other names, by the way, before we jump into other terms, Saskatchewan Screamer.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a couple other.
Yeah, were you going to go into this? Because I was
going to go into
nice.
this. Sorry, were you going to go into it, Mike?
No,
I didn't mean to
go ahead.
take your thunder here. We got the Manitoba Mauler.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't know if these names were like actual things or if they were just like
They're not as common. They're not as common
right.
as as other.
Maybe
things.
They should be more common though. Those are good ones.
They should. They should be. Yeah. But another one's the Ontario Screamer, or sorry, not Screamer.
Saskatchewan.
Saskatchewan Screamer. Sorry.
Yes.
The Ontario Scario. Sorry.
Well, I never heard of that one. Okay, I've heard of Saskatchewan Screamer. I've heard of
Watch
Manitoba
out for the
Mauler.
Ontario Scario, guys.
I gotta say, I've never really been scared from something dropping out of Ontario. That's just does not have enough time to get going.
No, you're right.
It's
too far east.
Yeah. But hey, you know what? I mean, there you go. Now you all know what a Saskatchewan Screamer is. Whenever you hear it, it's not a bear, it's not a Yeti. It's a Clipper system.
I'd like to go to Saskatchewan one day and visit the town of Moose Jaw. One of my life goals.
Anyway.
Well, there you have it, folks.
Well,
Brad wants to go to Canada. But the next one we have on the list, it's Brad said I should do 2 at the ssame time.
Yeah.
Snow squalls.
Because they sometimes.
What were you gonna say, Brad?
They come in with those Saskatchewan Screamers.
Yeah. Typically snow squalls. You have them kind of coming in with deep troughs with bowling ball vorts, kind of a lot of energy in the atmosphere. It's cold. You think of snow squalls almost like thunderstorms, and I know we mentioned this in the podcast in older episodes talking about snow squalls, but These are the sneaky kind of snow that don't last very long. They typically can last like maybe 5 to 15 minutes, maybe a little longer than that, but they're very quick, just
they're
like
problematic
thunderstorms.
though too.
They are very problematic. They can reduce visibility to, less than a mile, half a mile. I mean, they're very, very sudden too. You may be driving on the road and you look in the distance and you see just kind of a wall of white headed towards you, and all of a sudden it hits you and you can't see the car in front of you. Again, it's very, very similar in, I guess, visibility to fog. You really can't see, and then of course you have the added unfortunate thing to it is you have the wind, you have the snow. It just makes conditions not fun to drive and very dangerous. I mean, we've seen tons of car pileups, 50 car pileups because of snow squalls, which is why the National Weather Service has actually recently, in I think it was a couple of years, right? They now issue snow squall warnings, which actually get pushed to phones because these are dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not only that, they drop the temperature like to that crucial level. I mean, it could be partly sunny and 38 degrees, and thinking, oh, it's not a bad afternoon here, middle of January. But yeah, like you said, Mike, if you get one of those snow squalls, that temperature can quickly drop to 32 at the height of the squall. You got the moisture on now the road, and it just turns into black ice so fast, which we'll talk about later. But and we've seen several unfortunate examples of that over the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I do find snow squalls rather interesting, though, because of its such uh, impactful snow so quickly. I would say it's got to be up there with one of my more interesting winter weather
Yeah,
phenomena. I mean, obviously, blizzards and things like that are,
right.
top of the
Right.
food chain.
And
But
what's also odd with the snow squalls like that is the radar doesn't always tell the story, because the radar beam obviously is going up as it leaves the actual radar site. A lot of the times these snow squalls are underneath the beam and it won't catch it. Like you'll say, oh well, it just looks like a little snow shower, a couple flurries there, but the bulk of the moisture is underneath the beam, so you don't notice it, but you'll see it on cams and stuff like that, and it won't match up with the radar sometimes.
it's interesting. I think I could segue into, since we did talk about the snow squalls and dropping temperatures and a little bit of black ice, we can kind of run right into the black ice flash freeze sort of idea here, because you might hear that several times over the winter too. And a snow squall situation could be one that causes a problem, especially if it is warmer to start. Maybe it's along, and these squalls are along an Arctic front, coming down from Canada. So temperatures drop quickly behind that. So maybe the roads don't accumulate that much. They end up being wet. And then once you get those temperatures to fall, you could have a flash freeze situation, especially if you're going into sunset and into the nighttime. As long as the winds aren't too high to dry things out. But yeah, those are some situations where freezes can occur. Same sort of thing can happen on the backside of the nor'easter that we talked about. This is something that typically happens in New England, where the storm may be moving out. However, cold air starts filtering down on the backside of the storm, and they were just raining, and now all of a sudden we're dropping well below 32, and everything starts freezing up. So certainly have some flash freezing in that instance too. And black ice kind of goes with the flash freeze. But I think the important thing about black ice is that it's one of those times where things get icy and you can't really see it on the road. That's why you call it black ice,
It
because
looks wet, right?
right, the road looks wet. You see the black asphalt, but it's below freezing and it's icy, and you just don't realize it. So black ice can be a very dangerous situation for.
And before you know it, it's too late, and you can't do anything about it.
So that's one thing that really needs to be paid attention to. So if you see warnings about there could be some black ice formation, that's certainly something you want to pay attention to if you're going out traveling. And sometimes this black ice can even form when we have like a pavement frost situation almost. So
What's
we
pavement frost like?
yeah, I mean, we all see frost form on our cars, form on the grass, form on rooftops, but frost can form on pavements too. It's not out of the question, and typically this happens when you have a very cold air mass in place, keeping those pavements really cold, well below freezing. And then you might have some extra moisture get added into the picture, and maybe the temperatures are actually rising a little bit along with those dew points. You're still below freezing, but you're getting that extra moisture. You're getting those temperatures to come up. So you start getting the frost to form, and that can form right on the pavement, kind of like if you took an ice cream sandwich or something like that, out of the freezer, and then you get um, the ice forming on the outside of the frostiness, or maybe you have uh, uh, an ice cream float or something, and the outside of the glass turns frosty. I know. I'm like, man, I could really use one right now.
I was gonna say, I'm right back. I'll be right back, guys.
um, so those are some things we really pay attention to. A lot of our meteorologists train about this too, because it is an impactful thing, pavement frost, that can cause a lot of accidents because people aren't really aware of it as a normal thing that happens. So something we really pay attention to in the wintertime.
And, something that Mike mentioned about, you can't see it. It sometimes looks wet. And this is going to segue into what Brad's about to talk about. Because I think this sort of talking about ice kind of, it actually, it makes sense to talk about it afterwards because so many times we see it rain, the day before, and the winds are really light and skies go clear. And so many times, we see people they don't really understand like everything is wet, it was in the 40s, and all of a sudden a couple hours later into the evening it drops into the low 30s, upper 20s, and the pavements really cool down quick, and you have just a horrible black ice situation, tons of ice everywhere. And I've seen it multiple times. People don't realize that it's about to happen, and it could cause some problems. Sometimes people are out there, and it just makes for a really bad driving situation. So, but ice is really nothing to really take lightly, so to speak.
Yeah, so like you said, Mike, that'll take us into freezing rain, and we've talked about this before, and we've had it on other podcasts. But again, it's something that we need to just discuss once again as we head into the winter. And basically, freezing rain is it's rain that's falling as liquid. A lot of folks kind of
Rain always falls as liquid, doesn't it?
Yeah, you are correct.
You got them.
But the difference here is,
Boom.
it's gonna freeze on contact, and it's gonna fall as liquid. And I mean, you could have freezing rain. Of course, you need the surface to be 32 or below to have the freezing rain. But I've seen freezing rain with temperatures in the mid 20s. You would think it's got to be snow. It's 26 degrees out. It's got to be snowing. But if that cold air is just shallow enough where you're not making snowflakes above, it could still have freezing rain at those low temperatures, and that's when you get into big problems because it's that cold when you're 5-6 degrees below freezing. It's going to freeze on contact with everything, including the pavements, including the sidewalks, and it's the worst winter precipitation you can have. I'd rather have a foot of snow to remove, and I'm sure a lot of our clients would, than trying to deal with the impacts of a couple of hours of freezing rain, because it's just ice on top of ice, and it's just so hard to just remove and take care of.
Right. I mean, so many times I've gotten questions from, consultation calls saying, "Oh, it's raining. We're good, right?" And you go, "Oh man, it's still 28 degrees, so no, you're going to be in bad shape." And um, from a snow and ice industry standpoint, yeah, it's one of those more difficult things to handle because basically you salt it so no ice forms, but then it keeps freezing rain on top of that. The freezing rain continues to fall, and then it dilutes your salt or product that you put on your pavements, and then things start freezing up again. Then you got to come out and salt it again. So you might make 2, 3, 4, 5 salting runs trying to keep your property free of ice, especially on a zero tolerance type situation site. And yeah, I mean, you're just going to use up those salt supplies very quickly. And that's why it's one of those things that the snow and ice industry isn't super thrilled to see. They'd rather just have the clipper there that Mike talked about, with the 2-3 inches of fluffy snow, scrape it off real quick, and you're in good shape.
And it's also difficult for these snow and ice contractors because, as you said, it not only dilutes, but when you have to go out there to, right before the system actually happens, like if you have a forecast and there's going to be freezing rain,
Yeah, you
but
can't really
precip
pre-treat.
types, you can't pre-treating it's a gray area, right? If you go out there to pre-treat, but it's going to be pouring rain a couple hours before it drops below 32, it's not worth it.
Right.
Sometimes these guys have to go out as temperatures start to drop so that their product doesn't get diluted to the point where it just won't be effective when it starts to get cold. And I've seen so many times people decide to pre-treat well in advance, and then they wonder why is nothing working. Well, you went there too early. And it's just a bad situation all around. I wish we didn't have freezing rain. I wish it was banned from forecasting. Like no freezing rain. You're either snow or you're rain.
Yeah.
Boy, God, that would make it so much easier, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah.
Man. Okay, can we like put a suggestion into the suggestion box for the atmosphere?
for it.
Send it to Ma Nature.
Yeah, hey.
Hey, Ma Nature, no freezing rain this winter.
Yeah, and also no sleet.
Sleet.
There you go. Let's move
Yeah.
right
Mike,
into
do you know more
another
about sleet?
P-type.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, this is another thing that sometimes gets confused, where people might say, in the middle of winter it's hailing out or something like that. But it's not hail. Hail is something that happens by a different process in the summertime in thunderstorms. But what happens with sleet, it's still balls of ice falling from the sky. So that's what sleet and hail are both technically. But sleet forms in a different process where you have the snowflakes falling from the cloud. It runs into a warm layer, melts the snowflake into a drop, and then there's another cold layer below that that's thick enough to freeze that raindrop into a sleet pellet, which is like the size of a BB or something like that. So that's what sleet's all about, and that's another thing that's a struggle when it comes to trying to clear it. Personally, I've dealt with it in a past life, I could say, when I was snow plowing for a landscaping company. And, sleet is just a hard thing because, first of all, it doesn't respond to de-icers as quickly, because they're balls of ice, not, fluffy snowflakes. And secondly, it's harder to push, especially if you don't have a pusher box and stuff like that for your parking lot and you're just using a regular straight blade. It just falls off the ends of the plow. It's hard to get it where you want it to go. And even with the pusher box, it could get quite heavy quickly once you start getting right. So you're going to need some pretty heavy machinery and loaders and things like that to push it around. So one of the worst sleet things was, this is way before Mike Priante's time, Valentine's Day. I think it was 2007. I want to say.
I was alive then. You think I was born in 2008?
You were around, but you were like, I don't know, in elementary school.
I was living down south, so I don't remember that one.
I remember that storm. Excuse me. I remember leaving school. I'm not going to tell you what grade.
This is in the Northeast, by the way.
I remember leaving school, and that you were going to say that was a storm that dropped like 4 or 5 inches of sleet, right?
Oh, it was so much sleet.
I was jumping in
Now
it,
I
like
was in
puddles of
the
sleet. I was like jumping in it when I was coming from school. It was
yeah.
fun, but you know.
Yeah, and this occurred eastern Pennsylvania, parts of New Jersey, stuff like that, and that's in my neck of the woods. So, yeah, it was just one of those things where it just kept sleeting.
And that's hard to do because sleet's usually a transitional precipitation type. It's usually
Right.
when you're going from rain to snow or vice versa. But to have that long and extended amount of time of sleet, so it accumulates to that, effect. Oh, geez, I couldn't even imagine.
Right. And I was out trying to plow this stuff, and I was just praying to God that can you just turn over
Yeah.
to snow. Because this is getting so difficult. And I remember even leaving and trying to drive on it was difficult because, going from site to site because it was almost like driving on ball bearings. And it felt like my truck wasn't even in four-wheel drive. I had to get out and check if the hubs were locked on the front wheels and, all this kind of stuff. And, it, it was it was one heck of a storm with regard to sleet. So yeah, I mean, sleet also makes things denser. If you have a all snow, it's easier to work with than snow and sleet mix. So yeah, I mean, sleet is one of those tough deals, and grapple is sort of, I would say, related in a sense. But this is something that typically happens in more of a snow squall, where you get a snowflake getting rimed in ice. There's a layer of super cool water droplets or something like that within the cloud that allows the snowflakes to get rimed up, and then they look like, a lot of people say, dipping dots or
Yeah,
whatever.
Dipping Dots.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It looks like little, like you broke up a bunch of styrofoam, and that's kind of what it looks like. When it falls, and they do happen in snow squalls at times when temperatures are marginal. So that's certainly another aspect to think about in the winter. What do we got next?
Oh, it's a good
Who?
question. Who we have next? Who could be talking next?
Hey, while we're thinking about what's going next, it got me thinking when we were talking about Clipper, thinking about the Yankee Clipper, which is the nickname of Joe DiMaggio.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
And I was like, hey, I wonder if he got it from the same idea. And it is. He got it from the sailing ship, the Clipper ships. And I guess it's because he was so swift in playing center field that he can shag down all the balls very fast. So they called him the Yankee Clipper.
what about the LA Clippers? Maybe they're just fast.
You know what? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. We'll have to let's get our producer to look that
He
up.
likes to do that.
Oh yeah. He's on.
You know what?
The
This
podcast,
podcast
so.
is not called the Clipper Podcast. So all right. I'm just going to talk about what blizzards are, and they're not the things from Dairy Queen. So let's just put that out there.
Oh, those are so good though.
Blizzard, they are good. Have you ever you've done the blizzard test, right? You've stuck it upside down and it doesn't come out.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. They used to do that before they handed it to
Right.
you. I mean, this is
I saw a video
back in the days when malls were a
I
thing.
saw a video
right?
of someone who did that, and the poor girl did it, and then like after I guess she did it too long, and it just all fell out on top of the counter.
Oh
It was
no.
not good. I guess maybe it wasn't cold enough, or it was probably like, I think what happened is it was like they were waiting to give it to the person, and the person asked them to do it, and I guess she didn't realize because it'd been sitting out there for a little bit of time, so it started to melt a little bit, and so it just all plopped out.
But Oreo cookie vanilla blizzard was my go-to.
Butterfingers were good, but they get stuck in your teeth.
Butterfingers, yeah.
Yeah, but the Oreo cookie one, man. Ooh.
Well, the types of blizzards.
Go find a Dairy Queen.
The types of blizzards we deal with here in the Northeast don't rely on the the very thick ice cream. But blizzards, they happen across the country, right? But I think they're overused. The term is overused, blizzard. I mean, I hear sometimes people saying, "Oh, it's a blizzard out there." It's like, is it really? Is it typically a blizzard? Because there are actually pretty strict guidelines for what a blizzard has to be. Just because you're getting 40 inches of snow doesn't mean it's a blizzard. And you can get a blizzard in like 5 inches of snow. I mean, it depends on the wind. The wind is the big criteria for blizzard conditions.
And visibility, right?
Visibility too. Yeah, it's visibility and wind. I mean, those are pretty much the only criteria.
It used to be cold, but I think they dropped that.
Yeah, I guess I
That
guess
was
No cold. Misnomer.
yeah, but I guess they realize, hey, it's cold in winter. It's cold in a snowstorm. I mean, I don't know how many snowstorms you've gone out there and you're like, boy, it's balmy out there.
It's
Let me
warm
take my
out here. It's a
jacket
warm
off.
snow.
Maybe after maybe in like North Dakota,
Yeah.
they take their jackets off and it's like 28 and it's like, oh, it's balmy out there. It's like, all right, whatever. But the criteria is that winds have to be, I believe it is over 35 miles an hour, gusts and sustained. And I
Yes.
don't know exactly how long they have to be. I think it's like
it's gust or sustained,
at 35, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's another criteria called a severe blizzard. A severe blizzard has winds over 45 miles an hour, near zero visibility. I should say quarter mile or less is what a blizzard is. But near zero, 45, and actually, funny enough, I didn't see this in the definition, but apparently that cold, I guess, criteria comes back for a severe blizzard, Brad. You have to have temperatures below 10 degrees Fahrenheit is a severe blizzard. What place on Earth has severe blizzards pretty often?
Plains.
Anybody guess? No.
I'm gonna go with Antarctica.
You are correct, sir.
Down there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about it. It's a very flat area, I mean, there's nothing really in the way for there's no friction at all. It's just pretty much just going to blow across. So yeah, I mean, very, very, very easy to do it. And out there, sometimes they can have winds over 60, 70 miles an hour. So we're talking like a hurricane blizzard, pretty much. Hurricane force gusts in a cold environment. There's another thing called a ground blizzard. And a ground blizzard is really not with actual falling precipitation. And sometimes in a storm, it's tough to see whether or not it's actually falling from the sky when the winds are so strong. But a ground blizzard is basically when the winds are strong enough, but the snow has ended, but it's still blowing around off the roofs, cars, on the ground. Really the only difference is there's no precip falling from the sky. It's just the wind is blowing it around. So yeah. Other terms for blizzard: a blast, a blister, a bluster. Hey, I'm just reading it as I find it. All right, I love etymology.
It's a blizzard.
It's a blizzard. Well, the definition, the modern definition was coined in the 1850s, and it became common in the media, the press, back in the late 1800s. The blizzard of 1888 might have something to do with that. But yeah, blizzards are very common. Not very common, but they're commonly used. But not all the time are blizzards. So make sure you next time you get a snowstorm, make sure you say, is it a blizzard out there or is it just heavy snow?
Right. Yeah. Remember the criteria. We're looking for the sustained wind, frequent gusts of 35 or more, and falling, blowing snow, reducing visibility less than a quarter mile for 3 hours or more. So even if you get 2 hours and then you get an hour in there, that doesn't do it. And then you get it back to below a quarter mile. Yeah, you got to be consecutive on that. But yeah, so that's blizzard. Sometimes you can get some blizzard conditions in lake effect snow.
Yeah,
you can,
honestly. And I'm sure everybody who lives in close proximity to the Great Lakes knows about lake effect snow and the immense amount it can produce in a short amount of time. But basically, how lake effect snow forms is that you have warmer lake water and you have very cold air blowing over that warmer lake water. So basically, it picks up all that moisture coming off the lake and deposits it basically downwind of the Great Lakes. And you get lake effect snow. Typically, you want a 13-degree difference between the lake temperature and temperatures at 850 millibars, which is about 5,000 feet or so. So that's what your criteria is to get the lake effect snow to happen. And yeah, I mean, it's a very impactful phenomenon around the lakes, especially when you get a single band coming off the Great Lakes, which happens when you have the winds going pretty much parallel to the length of the lake, the longest length of the lake.
And we had a record-breaking lake effect last year, 2022.
Yeah, that was what was that outside of Buffalo there?
Yeah, that was the big boy.
Yeah, that I forget exactly how much snow fell out of that, but I know it was
over 70 inches in some spots.
right. Yeah, I think it was something up that high. And yeah, one of our clients actually went out there to aid in the situation out there, and he was helping out with a snow melter and trying to get rid of that snow because there was so much
You can only put so much snow in so many places. You got to get rid of it, I guess, somehow.
Right. So, and yeah, snow melting is a good idea. You dump the snow into the melter, it puts it into water, it goes down the storm drain. Pretty good idea, I'd say.
And we did have an episode with him, by the way. Another plug here if you want to really learn how that storm actually impacted people.
When he went down there.
Yeah, that was, I believe, looking back in our archive, that was back on December 14th was the episode in question, revisiting the November 2022 lake effect event.
Yeah, it's about a year anniversary now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting close to it. So if you want to know more about it, and we talked to Jake Shivo from JSP Properties, he was a great guy on the podcast. Check it out whenever you can after you listen to this episode.
But the important thing, thanks for throwing that in there, Mike. That's definitely a good episode for people to listen to about lake effect snow. But lake effect snow, the rates that occur within it are incredible. Talking about 3, 4, 5, 6 inches an hour can happen at times. It's pretty amazing. And I know I've said this in previous podcasts, but 4 inches an hour was the most that I've seen. So that's unimaginable how quickly the snow is accumulating. So if you're getting that in lake effect snow, now you know why you can get 60, 70 inches falling in an event very quickly. And sometimes in lake effect snow, you get thunder snow too, which is quite interesting. I haven't quite experienced thunder snow, meaning lightning and thunder within a snowstorm. I'm still trying to find that. The closest I've gotten was when we were having sleet and it thundered. That was in Hackettstown back in the old days. But yeah, thunder snow is certainly a fun thing, and one thing you see, guys like Jim Cantori on TV, in his blizzard and getting his thunder snow and freaking out. I'd probably do the same thing, honestly, because I haven't technically experienced thunder snow per se.
That's the coolest thing I think about. Yeah, any kind of winter storm, I would imagine.
But you know what's cooler than that, Brad? The last thing that we're going to be talking about today.
Our last winter weather jargon. Do I get the
which I think you have a little bit of a history with because of your name.
Again, you may have to do the history back check on this. I don't know how it got its name, but so kind of going back to nor'easters, and I think we covered this also in another podcast when we did what was called Under the Hood of a Winter Storm, which was really, I thought, one of our best podcasts ever. You got a little meteorologically, inclined and terms and stuff like that, and how the atmosphere works with, cold conveyor belts, warm conveyor belts. A little technical, but it was a good podcast. But anyway, there's two types of nor'easters really. One's a Miller A, Brad Miller, and the other one's a Miller B. Yeah. So
how about a Miller Lite?
Oh well, that's funny you say that, because that was kind of like my nickname in college. I'm not a big dude. I'm a little guy, but it has nothing to do with the beverage.
Miller B is perfect, though.
True.
I mean, because you got Brad as the first name.
So the Miller A storms, typically nor'easters have two types of tracks usually. The first one is called the Miller A, and that's when it originates actually down in the Gulf of Mexico. Actually, the low pressure system itself kind of develops there. And a good example of this is actually the storm of the century. And we're going way back to 1993, but this was a classic Miller A where it kind of gathered strength. It basically bombed out in the Gulf of Mexico, and then it just rode northeast up the East Coast and just didn't miss a spot up and down the East Coast. I mean, it was just one of those, storms that just nobody missed it. But it produced heavy snow from Maine all the way down into Georgia, and severe weather in Florida. I mean, that's like one of the big worst case scenarios. But that's in Miller A when it develops down the Gulf and it kind of goes right up the East Coast and brings everyone lots of snow. Now the Miller B, a little different. This is more of a Clipperish type system almost. It's not really a strong storm. It's coming across usually the Midwest into the Ohio Valley, and it's actually weakening as it hits the Appalachians. But at the same time, it's kind of transferring of its energy, if you will, to like the North Carolina coast, somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, and that's where it really starts getting its act together. It's going to bring some heavier snow to the mid-Atlantic and into maybe like New Jersey and even into Pennsylvania along the I-95 corridor, but usually the Miller type systems, they peak for New England, and that's usually who gets the bonus snows out of a Miller B system. So Miller A, Gulf of Mexico, up the East Coast. Miller B, kind of a Midwesty Clipperish type system that redevelops off the Mid-Atlantic.
Yeah, and if you want to see examples of Miller B storms, just go look back at the 2013-14 winter, because I think every single one was a Miller B that there was some sort of clipper energy, then a bombogenesis situation possibly off the East Coast, and just New England just kept getting crushed, with foot plus type storms. It was quite amazing. It was almost like after a certain amount of time, our clients were like, "Oh, what are we getting this time? About a foot?" And I'm like, "Yeah, about a foot, maybe two." And they're like, "Okay."
At that point, it was just like, ugh.
Yeah, okay. And then if I said like, this one might produce like 3 to 6, they'll be like, "Oh, that's it."
That's
so
a dusting now compared to what we've been doing.
Yeah, we're good at that. I mean, they were like, "I don't know where I'm going to put it, but at least it's not a foot."
So if your history, and there's a blog article on weatherworksinc.com about the Miller classification, and researcher J.E. Miller. So it was a Miller, Brad. I don't know if he's a relative of yours.
That was my uncle. That was my uncle Jay.
Uncle Miller. It's
Uncle Leo.
Yeah, he came up with the system back in 1946. So yeah, there you go. And obviously, I don't think they would have just been like, you know what? Let's just call it Miller out of nowhere. It has to be someone's name, like Alberta Clippers from Alberta.
Yeah, that's usually what we get.
Yeah, but you know what, guys? I think we're running a little bit over here.
Yeah, there's other jargon out there, but you got any questions? Email us or send us something on social media. We'll talk about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You mean weather boulder dash?
Yeah.
Lingo, weather lingo. I like that.
Right, absolutely. But that is it for our podcast this week. And thanks everybody for listening. I'm sure you enjoyed all the weather lingo and jargon that we had to throw out there for you. But maybe now you have a little better understanding about what you may be dealing with when you hear these words on your local weather forecast. So again, that is it. Thanks for listening, and be sure to visit weatherworksinc.com, our parent company, and also visit WeatherWorks on all the social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, X. I think it's called X now, of course. Absolutely find us there. So that's it for this week's episode, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.